Okay, let's take those tools and let's get to work on these roses. First of all, we have to remove dead wood. You can see some dead wood right there at the center of the screen. We also get rid of the sick canes and unthrifty canes, skinny canes. We've got all those canes in there. So we're going to get to work with our hand tools. We also want to get rid of big old canes. The younger the cane, the more flower production. The big old ones, they just don't produce that much anymore. So we get rid of some of the big old canes, allowing new canes to emerge from the plant. So on this slide, the cane on the left is the big old cane. That's the one I would get rid of. The one in the center is maybe a couple years old, and the one on the right is a very young, vibrant cane. Here we are removing deadwood, and this was a pretty big cut, so I'm using my loppers as opposed to my hand pruners. This is not a snake. This is a soaker hose running through the base of a rose. Looking at those two canes, the one on the right looks younger, being green. The one on the left is older and less viable, so I'm going to take that one out. So I'm on my knees with my knee pads, my long sleeve shirt, and my handsaw, and this is where I'm cutting this one off at the base of the rose. This old rose plant just wants to keep on going. You can see a new cane coming out of it. Roses can last a long, long time. Some roses are 50 years old or more. They keep producing canes, hopefully. If you're feeding them, if they're a decent variety, if you're keeping them watered during the season, they'll produce more canes. You could actually cut off that large trunk on the right and allow that new cane to grow, and this rose could just go on and on and on. Now, this is a beautiful cane. Look at those colors. It's just really stunning, except that it's sick and it should be removed. It shouldn't look like that. So it's had lots of problems, and you see that one skinny little cane coming out of the side that's never going to amount to anything. So this whole cane should be cut off. With some roses, it's not as easy to see the canes as far as which are the older and which are the younger. So you may have to pay a little closer attention. On this one, those old canes are in the center. Their bark is peeling, and they're obviously larger than the surrounding canes. If you were to remove the old canes, those are the ones I would take. This is a great example of old versus young canes. The one on the right probably grew up last year. The one in the middle, a couple years old. The one on the left, a big old cane that could be taken out. With a plant like this, there are quite a few canes available for flower production. So by getting rid of that big old cane, you're not really going to lose anything. Another rose that just wants to stick around, so go ahead and encourage it. Take off the big old canes if there's nothing coming out of them that you want to keep. Encourage those young canes, feed it, and hopefully this rose will go on and give you great flowers. This is not a healthy cane. Once you cut into it and you see the brown in the center, you realize that that cane is not doing very well. If you've got a long enough cane, you can continue to cut down on it 2-3 inches at a time until you get a nice white center. This cut shows that beautiful center. Now, in a perfect world, this is what all your cuts look like, but I know that's not the truth. So, hopefully you've got enough canes on your rose that you can get to this point, get rid of all that brown, and end up with a great cut. Some of your roses, it may be brown throughout, and you may want to consider replacing those with a good variety. So here's some skinny canes, unthrifted canes, rubbing canes. We want to get rid of a lot of that and get ourselves down to just some nice, strong, healthy canes. It's a great example of some pretty unhealthy canes. If you look at this, the shoots that are coming out of it are skinny, pretty weird looking. They're not going to do very well. And if you look above them, the canes have had some problems. They've had a long history. And so I would just go ahead and remove these, and hopefully you have some canes at the base that are starting to emerge. If you don't, well, maybe this one needs to be replaced too. Now this rose has a beautiful cane coming out of the left there. Oh boy, I'm happy. Wait a minute. That's not coming out of the rose. That's coming out next to the rose. Well, shoot, this might be a sucker, and suckers emerge from the rootstock. They don't emerge from the plant that's on the top. Plant on the top, well, roses, a lot of roses are grafted. They're grafted on a rootstock that is stronger than that rose that you see on top. So a lot of times when the top rose starts to get unhealthy, has a hard time, the rootstock, which is very strong, starts to send up its own shoots. And it can pretty much take over if you allow them to proliferate, if you allow them to stick around. So I dig down next to this shoot and find out, yep, it's growing next to the rose and not from the top of the rose. If you look to the right, you see an example of canes coming out of the rose plant itself and not the rootstock. So that sucker, you have to basically cut the sucker out a couple inches below the soil level. If you cut it off just at the soil level, it'll come back 2-3-fold. So cut it out below the soil. If you have a rose that starts blooming 2 different colors, it can be a sign that the suckers are growing, blooming, and taking over the top of the rose. So here's an example of a hybrid tea with lots of possibilities. It's got some skinny canes, it's got some rubbing canes, a little bit of deadwood, but it's got a lot of choices. So I think we'll come back to that rose and do our spring pruning on that one. When you make your pruning cuts, you want to prune on about a 45-degree angle just above the bud eye. The bud eye is that little line that's below the shoot where a leaf used to be on the stem. Anywhere there was a leaf, there is a bud eye. Now on this one, you see the shoot emerging, and it must be springtime. If you don't see a shoot emerging, you can still find that bud eye and cut just above it. Here's an example of leaving way too much. That top portion is just going to die out and be deadwood. Disease and fungus will start to eat that, and you don't want that on your roses. You got enough problems to deal with in the first place. This cut was too close. Not enough of the cane was left above the bud. So when this rose develops, gets its flowers, it's beautiful, we get our first rain, it's going to fall right over because it does not have enough support. This one's perfect. You leave about a 1/4 inch above the shoot or bud eye. This is an example of cane borer. The cane borer is a beetle that lays its eggs on the cuts of roses, and the youngsters go down into the rose and they munch, and that's why you see these holes in the top. They emerge as beetles, they fly off, and then they go do that on another set of roses. So when you come out to prune your roses in the late winter, early spring, you may find this on your roses. It's nothing to get too upset about. You can usually prune the cane down 3-4 inches until you get into good solid wood. If there isn't much of a cane left, then again, you may have to replace that rose. There is a way to seal off the cuts on your rose bushes to prevent the cane borer beetle from entering the rose. You can use Elmer's glue or a little dab of latex paint, which sets up a little barrier to keep the beetle from laying its eggs in the rose cane. Now, if you have a couple of special roses, you might think it's worthwhile to take your time and do that on a nice day. If you're dealing with hundreds and hundreds of roses, you're probably just going to say, let the cane borers have it. I'm not going to do it. That's up to you.